from multiple angles of some type of physical contact. I don't know if it was a full handshake and touch the forearm and all that stuff, very gentlemanly, or more of a dap. But Eric, this is just another, I can't even believe we have to talk about a story about, did he shake his hand? Is it a long enough shake? Why the hell is Richard Sherman lying about a handshake, Eric? What is the point? What am I missing here?
Because he likes to be the smartest guy in the room and the biggest mouth at the podium, right? I mean, that's just who Richard Sherman is.
Pretty good guess.
Pretty much through his whole career. And a lot of times he backs it up with his play on the field, and, you know, that's fine. But at the same time, to me, I just don't appreciate the lying aspect of it. Like you said, there was 1,000 cameras that caught this moment, whether they squared shoulders and gave the chest bump. It doesn't matter to me. That's all irrelevant. The fact is, Richard Sherman said that Baker just snubbed him, totally stiffed the handshake, and that is not true. They touched hands. They shook hands. There was not a brotherly love there, but they made physical contact with their hands. So, at the end of the day, it's a nothing burger, as they like to say in politics. It's a non-story because Richard Sherman is a liar. He's lying about the whole thing to create buzz, to create drama, to create whatever false motivation he needs to play football before a game. I don't really care. Just go out and do your job. But I think it's because the Browns are a target for drama. So whether or not this is Richard Sherman being a total liar, the fact is the team on the other side of the coin was the Cleveland Browns. And that's because they just seem to attract this type of crap all the time.
Yeah, they're a high-profile team. They're a team everybody talked up. Is Baker Mayfield that man must mow more grass than anybody in the country, because I feel like he is always on those progressive commercials. He's always on TV. He's got all the spotlight on him, and he really hasn't done anything to earn it. And I understand Richard Sherman's point about that, but just don't come out and lie about it. Don't make it a story. I mean, if you're mad because he ran off and didn't give you a second handshake, I mean, dear God, at least he didn't do what he did in Kansas and crotch chop you until you go F yourself. I mean, he at least has matured a little bit past that point. But this whole notion of guys have to show their respect and this and that. You guys are all getting paid. You guys are playing a child's game and getting millions of dollars. Get over yourself. You don't need 8 handshakes at a coin toss. That's never been a story before. So I don't know why Sherman made it now, but to your point, he's always had to find his way, even back to the Crabtree stuff in the playoff game and throwing stuff out there. And then he would kind of, this is kind of what happened, but he really wouldn't get into it. And that's just kind of been how he's put himself on the map, Eric. It seems like more with his mouth. Lately, his play hasn't been that great. He had the interception the other night, but the San Francisco front seven is making him look a whole lot better, I think, than he's playing with the way Bosa's playing and those guys up front. They've spent a lot of assets on that 49ers team, and they find themselves as the only undefeated team left in the NFC. So, Eric, we talked about the Cowboys. I don't think you can put them on this list, but you've got the Eagles playing better. Packers got a big win in Dallas. The Saints have found a way to hold things together despite not having Breeze. Talked about the Niners. So who's the best team in the NFC right now?
Wow, that's a loaded question, and I'll tell you why. I think there's some teams on this list that I didn't think were going to be there, one of them being Seattle. I think they're finding ways to win football games more than I thought. I mean, Russell Wilson, we talked about quarterbacks just a minute ago. We know Patrick Mahomes, 11 TDs, no interceptions. That's great. He's expected to do that. Russell Wilson, 12 TDs, no interceptions this year. So he quietly just continues to go about his business. Yes, he plays that backyard football style that we love and talk about all the time, but they're winning football games. So I think you got to give them a little bit of credit for that. San Francisco, yeah, they're 4-0. Their schedule hasn't been the hardest going into this first quarter of the season, but regardless, they're 4-0. The Rams are in third place in that division. So I think there's a little bit of a story brewing there in the NFC West, which I don't think many of us thought was going to be much of a story this year. So we'll talk about the Rams, I'm sure, in either later this episode or throughout the year, because their defense has really been disappointing. But to me, I think New Orleans is a story because, yeah, they've been without Breeze, and yet they continue to win football games. 4-1 is, I would say, higher than where I thought they would be. Now, you and I both in the preseason had them winning this division, and I think that's because we felt like we weren't sure about Carolina, and we kind of felt that Tampa Bay would have a losing record and Atlanta would just not be upper echelon of this division. Little did we know that Atlanta would be absolutely terrible. But New Orleans, 4-1 with a backup quarterback, I don't think I saw that coming. And then I got to give Green Bay some credit too, because it just seemed like they didn't have anything momentum-wise going into the year. You didn't hear a lot about Aaron Rodgers during the preseason because there really wasn't much going on with him in the preseason. They come in, they get some wins. They get one win with a great defensive effort. They get another win with some good offense. And to me, them being 4-1 is a story. The Eagles, great. 3-2. That's actually a disappointment to me. I figured they'd be 4-1, hopeful 5-0, but 4-1 at worst. So 3-2 to me, that doesn't cut it. Dallas 3-2 is kind of where I thought they'd be. I don't know where your head's at, but 4-1 for the Seahawks, Saints, and Packers. To me, I think those are the stories right now in the NFC.
Yeah, I tend to lean, and I don't know if they're the best team, but what they've been able to do with rebounding from losing Breeze and sitting at 4-1 right now is the Saints, and just the way they've played, and the fact that they're playing a different level of football from the defensive side than we've seen from them in the past few years. That always seemed to be the Achilles heel. It was always in fantasy or daily fantasy. Oh, the Saints are playing in the dome. It's going to be a high scoring game. They can just outscore teams, but they can't stop anyone. Well, now you've seen Dallas come in there. They really give up very little points in that game. Tampa's offense, we just saw them go into LA, put up 55 points. They struggled to move the football until towards the end of that game, and they got a late touchdown at the end when it was a 2-score game. So I just think the way they've played without having Breeze, with bringing Teddy Bridgewater in, as long as it's been since he's played football that had any meaning to it, and the fact that they're starting to get rolling, they impress me the most just from the standpoint of being able to hold it together. The Eagles, the fact that they've fallen behind in some of these games, the fact they went into Atlanta and lost, that concerns me some. Look, Green Bay is another team that I think they would be on this list if they would have been able to close out that Thursday night game. And if they would have been 5-0, I'd be hard pressed to say anybody in NFC is better than them right now. But somehow just watching that team kind of melt down and Rodgers throw what I thought was a bad pick at the end of that game with a chance to tie it, I just can't give them the nod, at least over Philly, and I'm not sure I can give it to them over the Saints. And Eric, I'm just not bought into the Niners yet. And I kind of left Seattle off that list because I had the Niners there at 4-0. But you're right. I think Seattle, if I had to pick one, Niners or Seattle, who I thought was going to win the NFC West, I think I'd have to go with Seattle right now just because they seem to have more dimensions than I think the 49ers have. If everything goes well, game script goes well, the 49ers, they can run the ball, they can pound the ball. But we saw Kyle Juszczyk get hurt at the end of that Monday night game.
Yeah.
And look, the 49ers have benefited from playing a bad Bengals team, getting the Steelers at home with Rudolph's first start. And that was one of the ugliest football games of the season so far. I don't even know how many turnovers was in that game. It felt like every time you turned around, there was a red zone turnover, and they found a way to win. So that's kind of where I sit right now, is just the most impressive team, I think, is the Saints. But I think the NFC, Eric, right now is loaded. Even teams like what you're seeing with the Rams, they've dropped 2 straight. And I'm not really sure what to make of that team at this point, because I think versus the Bucs in week 4, you can go back and look at the 2 first half interceptions by Goff. They got him down 21-0 in that game. And he throws for over 500 yards, but then the defense couldn't even get a stop.
Right.
And this was a team that Vegas had, we like to be the favorite to win this NFC West and challenge to get back to the Super Bowl. All of a sudden they're struggling. So we're only week 5, plenty of football left. Do you feel like this Rams team can get it turned around, or do you still have a lot of concerns about Goff and about the defense of the Rams that they can find their way back to the top of the NFC?
Well, I don't have much concern about Goff as much as I do about the defense. Now, I don't want to bail Goff out. I think he's not playing his best football right now. But if you look and watch those games, which I know you do and our listeners do, you're seeing good stuff from Cooper Kupp. I'm disappointed he doesn't find Brandon Cooks that much. I think he's really underutilized, but he finds Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp quite a bit. He's finding Everett out of the tight end slot quite a bit. And that's adding another dimension to that offense. So I don't think I have a whole lot of concern. Gurley's holding up a little bit better than I thought he would. Here's my concern. Aaron Donald was rated 99 on Madden Football when that just came out last month. Now, that doesn't really tell you anything other than the fact that to be rated 99 in Madden Football, you got to be really damn good. And the only 2 guys in that game right now who are 99s are Aaron Donald and Patrick Mahomes. Well, I just did a quick count, and the Rams have given up the 7th most points allowed in the entire league this year. There's only 6 teams that have given up more points than they have, and 3 of those teams have only given up within a handful, within less than 5 points that the Rams have. So really, you can throw them in the bottom 5 teams of the league in terms of defensive points allowed. So Justin, to me, that shows you right there, because their points for is just as good as many other teams and just as good as all of the teams in their own division, the NFC West. So the points allowed tells a big story. And I think if I'm the Rams and I'm looking forward at the fact that the NFC West is tough this year, and you've got those interdivisional games, this is a tough schedule for them to have a defense that, for whatever reason, on paper is great, but on the field does not have it pulled together right now. And I do want to just kind of add on to real quick one point you said, because about the Niners schedule, Darren Ravel gave out the toughest remaining schedules and the easiest remaining schedules based on win-loss records of the teams so far after 5 weeks. The San Francisco 49ers have the hardest remaining schedule in the league based on their future opponents' win-loss records right now.
Yeah, and I can't believe how competitive the NFC West is, that you have all those teams up there. Now, the Rams being really 2 games, or I guess a game and a half back of the Niners, because they haven't had their bye yet. But even when you look at the Rams' schedule, here's the concern that I have with this team. All right, they started out 3-0, but they beat the Panthers at home versus what we're assuming is a one-arm, one-leg Cam after what he came out and said. They get the Saints at home, and Breeze gets knocked out of that game super early. And they get that touchdown called back that the Saints returned that should have counted. That swung momentum in that game immensely.
Big time, right?
And you're throwing Bridgewater in there, and he hadn't played in years, it felt like. Then they go to Cleveland and play a Browns team we just shredded there at the top of the show about how disappointing they have been. So that was their first 3 wins. Then they give up 55 to Tampa at home, and then they go on the road to Seattle, and they can't close the deal. Again, everything may change if Zerline makes that kick, because then they're 4-1. And they've got some momentum, and they've knocked off Seattle, and they got a big win on a Thursday night, but now they've dropped 2 straight.
That's true.
And they're 3-2. So look, it's a game of inches at this point. And I think the one thing that's going to help the Rams is they get a statement game this week. They get the 49ers at home. That is a must-win game for a team that's dropped 2 in a row. And it's a perfect spot for them, because the Niners, off of that big performance in prime time, they got talked up all day on Tuesday, and they're 4-0, and they're undefeated, and then you got all this Richard Sherman drama. There is plenty of a lay-down spot. You talk about a team that could absolutely come in and be flat. That could be the Niners. And then the Rams get a reprieve because they go to Atlanta. The Falcons are a complete disaster. You've got the Bengals coming to L.A. They go to Pittsburgh to play a Pittsburgh team that who knows who's going to be the quarterback at this point. And then Chicago has been extremely up and down. We don't even know who's going to be quarterbacking that team before they have to play the Ravens. So the Rams have an opportunity to really turn this thing around, where Seattle and the Niners may have a little bit of a tougher road during that span. So this is the opportunity they have to really rebound. There is nothing that says during that stretch, Eric, they shouldn't be at a minimum of 4-1, if not 5-0. And if we're talking about that in week 10, where they put 5 in a row on the board and they're sitting at 8-2, it's a complete different conversation I think we're having about the West.
Yeah. Wow. Just sitting here listening to you talk. I mean, you look at the fact that they could basically end the season for the Falcons and the Steelers as they go and play those teams in the upcoming couple of weeks here. I mean, that's a gut reaction I'm having right here on the spot in the moment, but I'm just kind of sitting here realizing that the Falcons and the Steelers, 2 franchises that have been in the playoffs pretty repeatedly over the last decade, week 7, week 8, their season could essentially be over, as if it's not now.
Well, and this goes back to the point, and we didn't get to talk about there when we were talking about the AFC North, but how dumb does that Steelers trade look for Minkah Fitzpatrick now?
Oh, terrible.
Because they're sitting at 1-4. I don't see any pathway that they get to the playoffs. I see a better pathway that this is going to end up as a top 7, top 10 type of pick that Miami's going to pick up.
Top 10. Yeah. And yeah, at least.
That's a player that they could have added onto this team, potentially a quarterback, because we still don't know if Ben is going to come back and be the same guy. Mason Rudolph has not shown anything that I've seen that gives me the faith to think like, okay, this is absolutely the guy for this team. He's going to be their future. They can give away picks and go get a guy like that, Eric. And look, we talked about it the week this trade was made, that based on their schedule and putting a guy like Rudolph in there with no starting experience, this could absolutely blow up in their face. I think when he got knocked out on Sunday, and you have no idea when he is going to be back in this lineup, how he's going to come back from this, and the fact that they're playing a guy from Sanford, I don't even know where the hell Sanford is, and that's their hope.
I thought they misspelled Stanford.
I did too. I'm like, who misspelled Stanford on this thing? I mean, I had to go on ESPN box score and figure out who the guy even was. And that shows how bad the Ravens defense is because they almost still lost that game. So, Eric,